Attack Vector Tactical, 3rd edition, by Ad Astra Games, is a tabletop wargame of 3D spaceship combat, which sounds like a simple idea for a video game, until you have to do the math yourself. In the early 2000s, NATO failed the war at Middle East so hard it turned French. At 2214, all travel to and from Earth has ceased and communication had been completely cut. Nobody could figure out why, but I suspect there's a connection here. It is now 2265, the 10 worlds, the 10 colonies settled by humanity, are trying to not make the economy implode. Worse of all, they got saddled with a bunch of warships from before the loss, most of which are currently running out of spare parts they can no longer manufacture. All it will take is a little spark for the star to burn with nuclear fire. So, if you are in any Western sci-fi community or forum or etc., you probably have heard of Attack Vector Tactical in some ways, often in hushed tone, a dragon looming over the horizon, a game of spaceship combat so realistic it got atomic rocket stamp of approval, that's also seemingly too complicated to play, and also might have inspired the Expanse series itself because this game is old. Now, time to break down the Berlin Wall because I will tell you all about this game. Attack Vector Tactical, 3rd edition, is a game of 3D space combat and yet it's played on a 2D hex grid. For this to work, it needs a key component, AVID, Attitude Vector Information Display, which tells you everything about a ship orientation, direction, and vector. See that tiny orb? It's how AVID is supposed to look like in a 3D space. It's an orb, with the color band represent angles, 0 for yellow, 30 for blue, 60 for green and red for 90. These 6 symbols on the AVID, they represent front, rear, top, bottom, left, right, or port, starboard direction of the ship. The symbol being in circle means it's below, at the lower hemisphere of the AVID, which is useful because you can pivot and roll the ship however you like. Should you play the game physically, the tilt block can be used to orient yourself. 2 can be used to simulate both pivoting and rotation at the same time too. The vector of the ship is then represented by these tabs, 6 horizontal directions and 2 for up and down. At max, you can have 3 directions to go at a time. Opposing vector cancels out each other, and despite all these math, moving your ships is actually very easy, and this is the foundation which the entire game is built on. With this system, full Newtonian physics is possible, allowing ships to dance and drift along their vector, firing laser, coil guns, and missiles at each other, fusion thrusters and RCS flaring for better position or to evade, zone defense system barely keeping up with incoming dangers, till eventually, one could no longer keep up. No wonder Expanse is inspired by this game, but at the same time, you probably can't pull off the same stunts here. In AVT, there's no such things as Epstein drive, a very unfortunate name these days. Fuel is a massive concern in combat. You are in fact carrying so much of it your max thrust increase once you burn enough of it. Heat is also an issue. Waiting for heat to radiate out passively is not a possibility, especially with fusion reactor, but extended radiators are extremely vulnerable in combat, so during a battle, heat is stored in heatsink instead. But there could only be so much heat stored within, and eventually, it's gonna be a problem, meaning, your ship is on a timer. In space, everything costs, and AVT wants to shove the tyranny of rocket equation in your face. The winning move isn't just outmaneuvering your opponent, it's to make the fight costs more for your opponent. Your laser will always hit at long range, but maybe you should get closer for more damage. You can fire thicker zone defense to counter enemies' missiles, or you could just burn out of its path. Coil guns take low amount of energy to fire, but maybe you should save up on ammo until you get a good firing solution. Also, you have a nuke. Do you press it right now or not? Then there's another important aspect of AVT should you get into the game, the historical scenario. The setting of the 10 worlds is rich and interesting, but you don't need to know a thing to have a match in historical scenario. What you need to know is that AVT really likes to adhere to realism. Ship battle don't just happen out of nowhere. Instead, it's usually 2 ships encountering each other while out in patrol, after consuming a portion of fuel and supply. And once the battle is over, the victors, or survivors, still have to have a set of fuel and supply to go home, and if you don't, well, both sides just lost then. This just elevates the complexity of a fight to such an interesting level that not many other war games would ever cover. There's even things like historical loadout if you want to go full historical, and unique victory condition for each scenario. One scenario has you flying a severely damaged ship and your only objective is literally survive. In even larger and longer scenario, properly supplying your ship becomes extra important. Complex munition like missiles could go bad at the worst time, and while you can keep your crew alive by having supply consumption if you got unlucky with a battle, the poor morale might just doom the ship in the next battle anyway. It's kinda why the setting started off with Earth being cut off, because otherwise this kind of small almost age of sail kind of battle won't happen, and, well, any bigger and a match might take literal weeks to finish. And that's all you really need to know on Attack Vector Tactical to know what kind of gameplay you will get out of it. If you want, you can just skip to my final words on the tabletop war game, but if you want to learn how to really play the game, look at the timeline. It's gonna take a while. There's so much mechanic I need to properly cover that I have to cut this video down in segments. Now, let's start with the most important things. Time. A turn in AVT is consisted of 8 segments, each lasting 16 seconds in game, 1 to 8 for the whole turn, which is quite long, which makes sense. You are commanding an entire ship, not a small vehicle or two. Having a turn being cut down to segments also helps with micromanaging every component and action of a ship, rather than having everything being dumped onto your lap at once. Within a segment, things go step by step. You have to understand that the fire order to shoot weapons and long order to maneuver your ship and etc. are only revealed together after everything has been planned, with the only way to switch the steps around or change things up being the flex points, representing the commanding ability of a ship which regenerates every segment, meaning there's a lot of ways to read ahead of your opponents and outmaneuver them even at this stage. For example, after seeing your opponents firing coil guns, you can use flex points to change your facing and start accelerating away from the projectile, or you can use flex point to switch the fire order sequence around to fire your laser first, and hope that can disable your opponent before they can fire their lasers. And now that you know how things work segment by segment, let's move your ship, or rather, accelerate. Every ship has their own max thrust, that is, how fast they can accelerate. You also gonna need this. This is the thrust chart. It tracks acceleration segment by segment. The number above the thrust is the acceleration in G, just something to know. For every segment you burn, the track goes down block by block, separated into 2 colors. The left, or yellow, is for when your ship is oriented horizontally or vertically. Right, or green, is for ship oriented at a slant, 30 or 60 degree. On the left, you add 1 acceleration dot for yellow in the direction your nose is aimed at, 2 for orange. On the right, the green block is further split into major and minor components. At 30 degree, major or upper adds a dot to the horizontal direction, minor adds a dot to the vertical direction instead, and at 60 degree, this is reversed. As you burn, you can actually change the facing of your ship at this time to add dots in different direction. Pivoting and rotating also actually takes time in segment, as indicated by the number, and you can combine both at once, if you know what you are doing. You can also increase or decrease your acceleration as you keep burning. This is a lot to think about for sure, but one thing you don't need to think about is your position while burning, because to keep your sanity intact, all the acceleration you have done is only compiled together once you end it, and you can end it at any segment. Once you have done so, add the number to your current vector, recalculate how many spaces you will actually move per segment, cross out the amount of fuel you have burned by the dots in the center, and you are done. One more thing though, see these arrows? That's to indicate that you have been burning for so long, you are moving ahead already. This is called displacement. It's tracked after marking acceleration dot. You just move your future position marker by 1 at your nose direction, 2 for 2 arrows, and half arrow only matters if you hit 2 of them in a full acceleration. Considering how you only get these arrows for burning for so long, this is just the game giving you bonus for burning this long, because otherwise you gonna be a sitting duck. There's also mechanic for orbital maneuver, but I ain't talking about that. Now that you know how to move, it's time to shoot. For laser beam, that is, laser is simple. You point, it hits instantly, so all you need to know is whether the target is in your firing arc or not. First, identify the horizontal bearing by splitting the shortest distance into 2 components, then compare to see which of the 12 directions it is. Then you need to find out which color band your target is in. You will need this. This is RALT, or Range Altitude Lookup Table. We really got a lot of acronyms here. How you use this is simple. Horizontal distance here, vertical here, now cross the line, and the color corresponds to which color band or bearing angle the target is in. Easy. Now slaps it on the Avid, and count how many windows it takes to go from top or bottom to the bearing, and then do the same for nose, port or starboard. Then place the target marker on the firing arc diagram, and any laser weapon arcs with white square in that marker can shoot the target. What if your ship has pivoted and rotated all over the place? Same step, count the window vertically, then horizontally, and you will get your answer. If you get some weird splines, remember, attacker pick which one, and you are attacker. You can also find where the target is being hit this way too. Just flip the direction and angle, the closest direction is the facing it's getting hit at. Now, let's see how much damage you can do. When you read up on the weapons for your ship, it will look like this, a bunch of weapon codes. This is one example of laser. It's a class 3 medium range laser system. It takes 3 energy to fire, and you can fire it in 4 segments. Yes, that's a 5, but it includes the segment in which the laser is firing in, so it's a 4. Anyway, what you actually need to figure out the damage is here. These are the weapons cards. Look for the right laser classes, roll 1d10 to see how focused your laser is, check the distance, and that's your answer. The D stands for decimal, which is damage so weak, it's only good for shooting down projectile, which is something laser weapon can do. You can shoot them at full power, which will definitely shoot down a missile, or downfire it to shoot a weak rapid zone defense laser, or go for armor piercing mode for a short range anti-armor punch. Laser weapon can also directly target weapon mount for a flex point, and there's a trick here where you can snipe laser as it's firing in the same turn to shoot directly into the armorless lens for max damage, which is good because some weapon mounts are really armored. Anyway, once you got your bearing, once you fired your laser, what happens after your laser breached armor? Take the ship sheet of the one getting shot and look down. This is the internal of your ship in each location. After a laser or projectile has hit a location, first decrease it by this equation. This is to see if your damage has gotten through armor at all. The 2d10 minus is just higher decrease lower, usually you will get between 0 to 3. After that, it's time for real damage. The attacker roll d10 to see which component gets hit. Defender roll 2d10 minus to see how much damage from the pool get reduced. This is called a soak roll. Some components have armor of their own too, either because they are important or they are explosive. This continues until finished, or until hull depth is reached. Hull depth is essentially how much damage a location can soak. This depends on how big the ship is and the type, split between ball and cylinder. A standard shot from the side would usually go from port or starboard, then core, then the other side. If you have enough damage, a shot through the nose can go all the way to the propulsion, and that can be really bad. Rolling a soak of 0 is also bad, because that tick one box off structural integrity. More if you roll it past the first location, reach a box with number, you better not fail that roll because the ship will be dead in the water. What's the difference between hull depth for ball and cylinder ship? Ball is uniform, can't do anything about that, but cylinder, side has no armor but it will go right through real fast. Just don't roll 0, while a big damage shot through the nose is going to be like falling off a really long stairs. What's area for? Oh, don't worry about it, you only need it for nuclear explosion. It's funny to read it until you actually have to use it. There's also something about aim shifting to jump armor region with a flex point, but I think you can figure it out on your own, and with all these info, you can start playing AVT now. The book even suggests having your first match be between 2 ships shooting laser at each other. And now you see the reason why this video is so long. Let's talk about Coilgun, electromagnetic propelled cannon. These things don't use a lot of power, fire very rapidly, but their projectile takes time to reach things, and that's why there's a lot of math. Their class indicates how fast their muzzle velocity is, and this number indicates what they fire. 450 kilograms shells, 2 100, or 1 200. Bigger shells means more concentrated damage, but an unlucky zone defense roll might zap it out of existence. But also you always can fire more. The payload can also be upgraded too. AP to pierce armor, frag to blow through thin shell, hardening to get through zone defense better, and advanced self-guidance tech to concentrate damage. So why is the math so difficult? Here's why. You want to hit the ship. You can't hit the ship by aiming at it because it doesn't hit immediately. You have to figure out how long it takes for your shells to reach the ship, then you can aim at nothing to hit something by leading your shots. First thing first, we need to figure out the vector of the target relative to your ship. This is the launch board. It will be very helpful here. First, find the current bearing of the target. Next, get the crossing vector by adding the vector of the target in outer arrow and launch your ship aka you in the inner arrow. Do note that inner arrow is reversed. Be careful. Also add current acceleration dots because they are just future vector. Now treat the crossing vector as distance and calculate the bearing. Then find the course offset by how many windows between the target marker and crossing vector. This will be important in figuring out how much your coilgun has to lead to actually hit the target by checking this table. Divide crossing vector with muzzle velocity, and then see which box you can pick. The higher the better. In this example, you have to shift the aim marker by 2 windows towards the crossing vector, which mean from here to here, or here, or here. This is where your coilgun have to aim to hit, so check on the firing arc diagram if it can or not. Now you need to figure out the rate of closure. How many spaces the projectile move per segment to reach target, multiply crossing vector and muzzle velocity with the multipliers here and here, then divide the total result by 8 for ROC per segment. This is the moment where you decided if the firing solution is good or not, because a poor projectile speed leaves you with nothing but wasted energy. Just because you can hit the target doesn't mean you should. Anyway, the firing has been completed, but now there's a question: how do you account for defender's reaction, like evading or shooting projectiles down or just tanking things with strongest armor facing? This is the Shellstar. It's an amazing piece of tool. What the Shellstar simulates is a hail of projectiles fired from the attacker, and the defender can then figure out how to avoid the projectiles as it slowly approaches over the course of multiple segments. Let's talk about its component. You have the 9 prediction zones the attacker can place the payload in. Defender always starts in center and can accelerate to move into adjacent squares or just move out entirely. This is the impact window, which tells you exactly where the projectile will hit. Turning your nose armor to it when it hits is advisable. And down here is the time distance track, to see how close the projectile is as time goes on. See these 3 squares? This is where zone defense can start to fight back, coming in 3 types: zone defense counter missile that hits things really hard at the cost of ammo, zone defense particle beam that gives everything in every square cancer, and zone defense laser that can sorta do both. The faster the projectile is, the harder it is to take them down too. As mentioned before, in desperate time, laser system can be used for zone defense too. Same with Coilgun to really smack things away. Using frag round is advisable here for the Battlestar Galactica experience. Now, I can see some of you are churning your brain and think, what if I don't want to hit the target? What if I want to force them to move? And that's the beauty of the systems. You can do that. By concentrating the payload in certain direction, you can force the enemies to move out of it predictably, thereby taking away their initiative and possibly leading them into the real kill zone. There's no terrain in space, it's the big empty, so make some yourself and see if your enemy get baited or not. And that, to me, is the real beauty of the Shellstar and what it can provide you. Anyway, let's fill up the Shellstar. First, the impact window is just target marker, not crossing vector. In reverse, the plus or minus indicates if it's above or below the avid. For the 4 direction, top down is just the 3 windows above and below the impact window, which means it's DE++ and AB-. It looped around like so. For bottom, left right is always on the amber, and also 3 windows away from the center line, so C and F. You also gotta remember that Shellstar is meant for the defender to see, it's from their perspective, not yours. It's a rather common mistake apparently. Then you places the payload onto zones. The following symbol denotes which weight size, write out the damage on the right, and lastly, you fill out time distance track in reverse, starting at bottom right to top left, alternatively rounding the ROC till the distance is maxed out if it ends with 0.5, and that is how you shoot a gun in AVT. There's 3 missile launcher types in AVT: Katyusha, which fire 950 kg payload barrage at once, Tri-missile, which fires up to 3 missiles at once, and Big missile. It's big. In general, they all work the same. They launch a projectile that burn possibly over the course of several segments to accelerate towards the target, and that's why the math for firing these things are so complicated. The launcher for each type is basically the same. The payload however is not and can be customized, whether how long they burn for, and their content. Katyusha is much simpler. It's basically a rocket metal storm shotgun with salvos stacked on top of each other, up to 10 spaces worth, but payload for Tri and Big missiles can be truly crazy: basic projectiles, armor, EMP warhead, and even nuke. But to balance out crazy player idea, the reliability mechanic is born, so highly advanced prototype missile in historical setting will usually just fail to work. Missile is basically a perishable good. Non-Katyusha missile launcher can also expand firing arc by 3 windows with a flex point. You basically kick out the missiles and let it points in the right direction instead. Anyway, here's how calculating trajectory works for missile. Everything is the same as Coilgun. Muzzle velocity for missile is the max possible velocity, but now you have to pay attention to this table, and this one too, called MPAT, Missile Positional Adjustment Table, which is used to calculate the distance a missile covers during its acceleration. Essentially the hardest math is done for you so you don't go insane. Anyway, fill in the blue number according to burn duration. It's different for sprint missiles because they are fast, they burn for 1 segment only. Now get the total acceleration by multiplying ROC with duration, minus blue MPAT, and you get the burn distance, which you use to decrease target range with for burnout range. You might notice that it looks a bit weird. I will get to that in a moment. Now, Calculate time distance track on the Shellstar normally until you reach burnout range. Remember the alternative rounding rule, although this example has whole number for ROC, because the burnout range is like this, it get to be rounded up, then you get next range by adding rock and minusing red MPAT number, starting with burn duration 1 till whatever end number you got. Repeat until finish. Now write it back onto the Shellstar and underline it or whatever to show the missile is still burning here. The reason for all this math, a missile has the advantage of unable to be evaded while burning in, but getting shot in the state can be very vulnerable. This part here show the time and range the missile is still accelerating at. Intercepting a tri or big missile before it can release its submunition is extremely good. KTO shot is less easy to kill off completely like this, but it's still vulnerable when thrusting in anyway. This can be a lot of calculations, but the thing is, the book has plenty of tools to aid in the calculation, and in general, due to how slow ship in AVT maneuver, things like crossing vector don't change overnight, and if there's vector change, it's usually minor enough to quickly adjust over. I'm not gonna say the math doesn't look daunting, but the calculation is certainly easier than you think, and can be quite fun to work it out. For some people, I suppose. And that is truly just about everything you need to know on how to play Attack Vector Tactical. With this, I hope it gets through to you that AVT is actually simpler than it appears, and I'm going to die, but really, again, it's incredible just how much of the real math has already been hidden away into the various tool and mechanics in the game, so the players only need to do the bare minimum of homework to play the game. And I mean it, there's a lot of tutorials in the book and I fully recommend you to read every single one of them to understand the game. Yes, there's a lot of 3D space video games in just about every genre possible, most of which are vastly easier to play than AVT as the computer already does all the math for you. But sometimes you just want to do things yourself. The process matters just as much as the result. Sometimes, you couldn't help but be impressed that someone basically just made a mechanical computer to play games with. Anyway, you can get it now on Drive-Thru RPG, Wargame, Vault. This looks rather ancient, or just go for Ad Astra Games main website. You should double check that you are getting 3rd edition and not 2nd. Also, if you want to play AVT digitally, there's Tabletop Simulator mod, and Ad Astra Games in-house program to play, which is not really working right now since it's still transitioning to 3rd edition, and also the website link doesn't work. You gotta go Discord, it's still gonna be a lot of learn anyhow. Remember to grab support tool from the Ad Astra Games main website too because you will need it. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe and click that notification bell button. If you want to see the videos early as well as further support my channel, you can join in my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.